newspaper accounts and older individuals that I've interviewed all seem to tie it to baseball.
Yeah.
The southwest side of Mishawaka had a baseball team. They were the Southwest team. And they played other teams throughout the city. They played the Belgians a lot. So it could have been the Belgians, but it was quoted in the newspaper. You know, they were a ragtag band of hooligans, and people started just calling them that. And you know what? Hooligans decided they were just going to own it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're hooligans. We live in Hooligan Heights.
Yes.
And they became the Hooligan Heights baseball team then. And that was their official name region-wide.
I love it.
By the 1930s.
You heard that there. That is Mishawaka historian Susanna Ernst talking about how the Mishawaka neighborhood, Hooligan Heights, got its classic nickname. More of that later, but first, thank you for listening to another episode of Round the Bend Now and Then. My name is Matt Emery, and I'm a local history nerd. My main mission in this podcast, as well as other Round the Bend material, is to create engaging content that shares how intertwined the South Bend and Mishawaka area's past is to our present. In the podcast, I interview local leaders, business owners, and community members to help tell their stories, because their stories help tell the story of South Bend and Mishawaka. In this episode, I meet with local historian Susanna Ernst, and you'll learn all about a Mishawaka neighborhood that you might not find on any national historical registry. You're not going to see any huge mansions that were built by early city industrialists, and you definitely won't be stopping by any chic hipster coffee shops. But the Mishawaka neighborhood known as Hooligan Heights has a 120-plus year history that is just as intriguing and just as interesting as any of those more notable local historical sites. You met our guest, Susanna Ernst, previously on an episode about Mishawaka's legendary West End neighborhood. She's a fifth-generation Mishawakan. Her family immigrated here in the early 1850s. She's a Mishawaka High School and an IU Bloomington grad. She currently resides in Chicago, but will never lose her love and admiration of her hometown and its history. Susanna wrote a wonderful article titled Hooligan Heights, Mishawaka's Wild West. And in this episode, we discuss her article as she shares the story behind the neighborhood's history. And as you'll learn, its history is multi-layered, and I think that Susanna's words in her article's introduction sums it up. While the area is often overlooked in discussions of Mishawaka history, its tumultuous past was a microcosm of what was infamously happening in residential areas throughout the United States in the 1920s through the 1960s. Hooligan Heights' history of restrictive covenants, federal housing policy, and subsequent urban renewal tells the tale of Mishawaka's Wild West. Be sure to check out Susanna's article. The link is in the show notes, and you'll learn why the story behind Mishawaka's Hooligan Heights is so intriguing. Before we learn about Hooligan Heights, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this episode and highly encourage you all to support them as well. Thank you to the Mishawaka Historical Museum for all of your support. The museum is an absolute gem in our community, and I can't encourage you enough to stop by. Thank you to the Portage Township Trustee Office. Jason Critchlow and his team are consistently working to improve the day-to-day lives of our community. If you own a small local business and want to work with another locally owned business to help support your technological needs, look no further than MT Box Computers on Mishawaka Avenue in River Park. And I think that this particular episode might be near and dear to the heart of the owners of MT Box Computers. So Matt, this one's for you. And now, learn all about Mishawaka's Hooligan Heights in our interview with Susanna Ernst. Susanna, thank you for joining us. You wrote an excellent, detailed account of one of Mishawaka's neighborhoods. It's nicknamed Hooligan Heights, and the article is called Hooligan Heights, Mishawaka's Wild West. And like most of our local history, there's a story to everything. And I like to always say that there's just so much history right under our noses. I'll be sure to put a link of your article in our show notes. And on social media, when we advertise the episode, we'll put a link in there as well. We're talking about the neighborhood nicknamed Hooligan Heights, and we'll get into the reasons why it was nicknamed that. But let's talk about just the geographical area, maybe some of the street that border the neighborhood?
Okay, so Hooligan Heights is on the far, far southwest side of Mishawaka. Mm-hmm. It juts out, and it's almost an island.
Yeah, it is.
In the middle of South Bend. But I will tell you, as far as the borders are concerned, if you want to start a fun Facebook fight.
Okay.
The best way to do it is get onto the Hooligan Heights Survivors Facebook page and ask them what the borders are.
Uh-oh.
And honestly, it just is a lot of back and forth, but everyone agrees that the borders are Ironwood, Logan, and basically Ewing, Dragoon.
Yeah.
It's the northern border where sometimes people argue about it.
Okay.
Some people will say that it goes as far north as the river.
Okay.
Some people say it's Lincoln Way. But the majority of people will say the railroad tracks.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's it's a big swath of land.
It is. It's a mile wide.
Yes. That's a big swath of land, definitely. In your article, you wrote that between 1900 and 1930, the number of residents in Mishawaka grew more than fivefold. It went from 5,500 to 29,000. In general, not just in the neighborhood, but in general, what were some of the reasons behind this exponential growth?
Well, within Mishawaka, there was a very rapid expansion of industry. It really started in the late 1880s. And by the turn into the 20th century, believe it or not, it was one of the leading manufacturers in the Midwest. So we had St. Joe Manufacturing Company, Perkins Windmill Company, Mishawaka Rubber and Woolen Company, which was the predecessor to Ball Band.
And you're wearing a T-shirt.
Yes,
I have that same T-shirt too, in Rugco, Studio and Gift Shop.
Absolutely. I love this T-shirt. And of course, Dodge Manufacturing and many, many others. A lot of it was due to immigration and births. Immigration was restricted by the Johnson-Reed Act in 1924, but immigrants tend to have large families. So a lot of Belgians and Italians, of course, were coming to Mishawaka, and they tended to have large families. But also, too, all the growth was not organic.
Okay.
Mishawaka had a very large annexation in the early 1900s. They annexed about 1,400 acres, and Mishawaka literally doubled in size.
That's wild.
At that time, they annexed areas that we all know today as being just a part of Mishawaka. So
right.
The West End, Merrifield Park, Mishawaka High School, Fairview Cemetery, and of course, Hooligan Heights. And at this point in time, when they did this annexation for the first time, Mishawaka and South Bend were going to be one contiguous urban area. So they were at that point finally butted up next to one another.
Not like empty, desolate land in between the two cities.
Right. There's no, you're on the line. You're either in Mishawaka or South Bend when you cross that line.
And when speaking of annexation and with the neighborhood known as Hooligan Heights today, that didn't, in the development of it, it didn't really happen in a vacuum, in one fell swoop in what you wrote. It was kind of happened in chunks. And it's kind of like, I don't know, to me it would seem like Granger in recent years, where it's not like all of Granger was developed at once. It was like Knollwood, Quail Ridge South, Quail Ridge North. And you had written that the large area we're discussing of Hooligan Heights was 3 larger housing developments.
Correct.
Milburn Place, Floral Park, and Lafayette Place.
That's right. And there were some smaller little real estate subdivisions in between them. Floral Park was one of the bigger ones, and it was in the center of the development. So for whatever reason, most people adapted that name, Floral Park.
Yeah.
And that happens everywhere, all over any city in America. There'll be a name that's attached to maybe a subdivision, and eventually that name becomes the name of the entire surrounding community. Things like that just happen over time. But Floral Park is what it was originally called. And you're right. It did not develop all at once. There were many things that happened. There was the annexation. It was still farmland when it was annexed.
Yeah.
And then developers kind of came in slowly, buying up properties from the farmers. And also, too, there were things like World War I that happened, and things slowed down during World War I. And then, then we stopped immigration in 1924, at least a lot of it. So there weren't as many immigrants coming, and so it was a little bit slower to develop.
Kind of ebbs and flows, and it doesn't happen in a like in a vacuum.
Right. And the way, when you see it today, the way that it looks, it didn't really have that look until it was probably the 1960s, where it got to be where everything was filled in. Yes.
Yep. And we'll definitely get to that for sure. We mentioned the developers developing the land early on, and a lot of different advertisements and a lot of different things in the newspaper advertising why people should move and build in Floral Park. What were some of the advertisements or selling points?
Well, evidently, if you wanted to live in Floral Park, you would have modern amenities. You'd have your sewer, your city water, you'd have electric, and a paved boulevard.
Yes.
Milburn Boulevard. So also there were community wells with inexhaustible sources of clean water, which would be free. You'd be near the shady old St. Joseph River.
Yes.
You're also near the inter-urban car line, and that ran down 2nd Avenue, which is now Lincoln Way.
Yeah.
And so, transit access was really, really important because really this neighborhood is basically between the downtowns of 2 big towns, or cities, which was Mishawaka and South Bend. So you wanted to be able to get to either one. So having that mass transit there was very important, which is why it was advertised. And it was also advertised as being beautiful in a shady residential district and at the foot of the picturesque Mishawaka Hills.
That would be those hills on Dragoon, right?
Correct.
Yeah. That's awesome. And even in your article, you had a few pictures of some of the advertisements from that time. And it was pretty cool. And as we're talking here, I just realized it was awfully close to Plainland Park and Springbrook Park, too.
Absolutely.
Which is another selling point right there.
Right.
You know?
It definitely was. It was very close to that. Now, that particular part of Hooligan Heights that was closer to Springbrook Park was developed last.
Yeah.
But it's still, yes, absolutely. Was that something that would be an enticement?
It could be.
Certainly. we find that historically people that lived in Hooligan Heights worked in Mishawaka or South Bend.
Right.
So there wasn't really, just because it was in the Mishawaka city limits didn't necessarily mean that is where they did, they had their employment.
A brief word from one of our sponsors. I want to thank the Mishawaka Historical Museum for helping to support our content, and I couldn't be happier to help support them and to continue to share the good word about the museum. I highly recommend that our listeners visit, and I promise that you'll learn something new about our area's history. You'll experience what is hands down the most comprehensive collection of artifacts and historical background, all specific to Mishawaka, Indiana. You will learn tons from the artifacts and corresponding information. You'll learn how early industry was crucial to Mishawaka, Cam and Schellinger Brewery, Ball Band, and Dodge Manufacturing, to name a few. You'll learn about famous Mishawakans, including professional baseball player Freddie Fitzsimmons or Coach Marvin Wood, the coach depicted in the movie Hoosiers, who also coached at Mishawaka High School as well. Speaking of Mishawaka schools, there's a whole section dedicated to the history of schooling in Mishawaka, including some real neat old uniforms, banners, and photographs. Speaking of photographs, the museum contains one-of-a-kind pictures depicting a variety of Mishawaka subjects, each with a caption explaining more about it. In the military heritage section, you'll learn about Mishawaka's role over the years in helping to keep our country free. In the historic landmarks section, you'll see some amazing pictures and artifacts from historical Mishawaka landmarks, some still standing and some that were sadly lost to time. There's also a section dedicated to the importance of churches and religion to the city. And if you ever have any questions about any of the artifacts or information the museum contains, Pete DeKeever, the president and curator of the museum, is an absolute tank of knowledge about Mishawaka, and he is there to answer any specific questions you have or to provide more background to any of the museum's artifacts. If you and a group of friends or family are looking for something to do and want a guided tour, the museum offers those as well. Again, folks, I highly encourage you to visit the Mishawaka Historical Museum. You don't need to plan an all-day visit. 1 or 2 hours is all you need to experience everything that I mentioned above and much, much more. They're open Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. For only a $5 entrance fee, $3 for children 6 to 18, and free for 5 years and younger, you can experience a local gem of a place at 121 South Main Street, just south of the Lincoln Way and Main Street intersection. When you stop in, tell them that you heard about the museum on our podcast. Again, I'm very excited to be spreading the good word and encouraging you all to visit. To learn more, visit their website at www.mishawakamuseum.org, or the link is also in our show notes. And now, back to the episode. You went on further to write about an era earlier on called the Great Migration, where millions of African Americans in the South migrated north to work in the factories. And history isn't always pretty. History isn't always beautiful and picturesque. And so, unfortunately, some of those folks were faced with some discriminations, and this occurred all over the country. The North, not just in Mishawaka, it occurred in South Bend as well. Talk to me about some of the racial covenants and its relation to Floral Park.
So, to back up a little bit, yes, the Great Migration.
Absolutely.
So we had 6 million Black people that moved from the South to the North. And that really happened between 1910 and 1970.
Okay.
I mean, there were some changes going on. For example, there was mechanization now. There was more agricultural tools. So manual work wasn't needed. The industry in the North was exploding. In the South, there were barriers to social status and property ownership, and there's racial violence was on the rise, and people were trying to get away also from Jim Crow laws.
Right.
And then also, too, here comes the war, and a lot of men were sent overseas. It left jobs open. So there was opportunities for Black Americans to come north. However, not everyone was comfortable living in an integrated place.
Right.
And people didn't want to live near people that they perceived were as undesirable or people that they wouldn't want to live next to. And I will tell you, fascinatingly, until 1917, cities used to be able to zone in a way that would keep those groups separate.
That's wild.
Right. So you'd have demographic groups that were not allowed to live in a certain place.
Right.
So the Supreme Court overruled that in 1917. However, people were still trying to figure out a way to get around it. And here was the workaround that they did. What they did is that real estate developers would take entire tracts of land that they were developing, and they would put a racially restrictive covenant on it, which would get written into your deed. Individual homes could also have these restrictive covenants written into their deeds. And what it would mean is you are legally prohibited to selling your property to certain racial groups if these restrictive covenants were part of your deed. And if an owner ignored this, you could be sued and you could be held financially liable.
That's crazy.
And you're right. But this was happening all over the United States by the mid-1920s. There were entire neighborhoods all over the United States.
The neighborhood we're sitting in now, Sunnymead, same exact thing originally.
Same thing. That's amazing. And that's what they did in Floral Park. They didn't sell to non-Caucasians. It was unabashedly discriminatory. So, and this was happening, by the way, it was happening all over Mishawaka.
Yeah.
And so that's why the demographics looked different than South Bend from a very early time. You'll notice that there were, for a long period of time, there were only white people living in Mishawaka. And I never asked questions about it. I didn't understand why, when you cross Ironwood Boulevard, why does everything change all of a sudden? Because when you're a kid, you don't think about those things.
No, you don't.
It's just, it is what it is.
Yep.
As an adult, looking back, I think, yes, that totally.
We question more.
It totally makes sense because it was a legal premise that was put into place. And this was in place for years until 1948. These restrictive covenants, they were fully legal and fully enforceable. They became unenforceable in 1948, and by 1968, with the Fair Housing Act, then they became illegal, and you could not do that anymore.
Right.
And I did want to comment about South Bend. You mentioned that they have them here, and most certainly they were all over South Bend too, but they just weren't everywhere.
Yeah,
in Mishawaka, they were everywhere.
Saying. Absolutely.
In South Bend had it in certain places, in other places it didn't. They allowed African Americans to move there.
Right. Again, our history isn't always pretty, but it's our history. And then by 1920, Floral Park's growth necessitated a new building, a building that the South Bend Tribune trumpeted as a monument to the progressiveness of the city. Talk to me about the new school building that was built on Milburn Avenue. It's still there today.
Absolutely. It is still there today, and it is the most architecturally significant building in the neighborhood that is Hooligan Heights. So in 1920, land was set aside on Milburn Boulevard between Hendricks and Jackson, and there was a portable school there for a while. So it was a school that they could move around.
Yeah.
But by 1926, they'd put in this beautiful, handsome new facility. The architects were Friarmuth and Maurer, and they were known for also St. Bavo.
Okay.
And they were also known for the Alban Cam House, which is now the Hacienda.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, And also to Firehouse number 4, which is near Riviera Drive and on Lincoln Way.
Okay.
Some pretty firehouses there. And by the way, they did buildings all over, the Notre Dame
it sounds
area,
familiar,
South
yeah.
Bend. I mean, so they were very prolific. Those are just a few of the buildings that they did in Mishawaka. But it was absolutely gorgeous. Some people said it looked akin to Mishawaka High School, although that was a different architect.
Same color bricks.
Yes. But
same era.
A fantastic, beautiful building that would serve K through 6th grade. And I think I think it's 700 people or children could attend there.
It's a lot of kids definitely squashed in there, and that's about 100 years ago.
That's right.
That's amazing.
That's right. It'll be 100 years next year.
I couldn't imagine being the principal of a 100-year-old school building and all of the added things that would bring. When they first built it, there wasn't the internet, there weren't televisions, heck,
No.
That's so cool. Another outcome of the huge growth in Floral Park was in 1926, they had 600 citizens signed a petition requesting that Floral Park be their own ward.
Yeah, that's right.
What would that mean? What?
So now, and I don't know if you're familiar with the way that Mishawaka is set up today, but it's set up into districts.
Okay.
And it's districts, so there's a council person for each district.
Right.
So a ward was what they called, that was a predecessor of what the district was. So it's kind of like a voting block. You have your own representative. You work together on issues. But at that time, Floral Park, it was part of the 3rd Ward, which included all of the West End. It included this giant swath of land that went all the way to Main Street. So it took a while to get to the polling places. They didn't feel necessarily like the 3rd Ward represented them all in totality. They felt like we kind of need our own space. So they petitioned, and the city of Mishawaka agreed. They voted unanimously that particular area of the city should be its own ward. It became the 6th Ward.
And I'm sure at the time that was a big deal. Somebody to represent their needs. And you're right, that's a huge area of land all the way to Main Street to Ironwood. And that's a big area of land. More of the interview in a moment, but first, a word from another one of our sponsors. I want to thank MT Box Computers for helping to support our podcast and our content. Located at 2921 Mishawaka Avenue in South Bend, right in the heart of River Park, MT Box Computers can help your business reduce its cost and increase its productivity. MT Box Computers is a full-service computer and network solution company. Their technicians are certified by industry-leading standards. They work with small and medium-sized businesses in the Michiana area to provide computer-related support, as they not only understand technology, but they also understand the day-to-day needs of small businesses. They strive to find the best solution for your business. Through experience, they have found that most companies have different needs, and those needs require different solutions. They'd love the opportunity to evaluate your business's current technology environment and discuss ways that they can increase your productivity and save you money. Check out their website at mtboxcomputers.com to learn more. A link to their website is in the show notes. And now, back to the episode. We talked about the developers earlier and trying to advertise to folks to move there. One of the tactics that the developers used to encourage property sales in Floral Park was to allow landowners to build and maintain temporary homes on their lots. Talk to us about that.
Oh, yes. So, and this was part of the reason why the neighborhood started to go into decline. But what was the impetus for that is, and I had mentioned this, we've been talking about this. So in 1924, the Johnson-Reed Act came into play, and that restricted immigration by quite a bit. And so Mishawaka had a lot of Belgians, Italians, and others pouring into it. I mean, as did South Bend. And all of a sudden, that growth was stymied. So the developers had built, had these big tracts of land, and they were assuming that people would be flocking to them. But we have our immigration slows down. And then secondarily, of course, Black people aren't to live there. So we've got people coming into the Great Migration. They're not allowed to live there either. So the developers got a little nervous because they weren't selling the properties as quickly as they could. So they thought, well, if we can't do it, we'll get people to buy these lots. We'll make exceptions. Say, hey, you know what? You don't have to put, a full house there. And, you could just put up something temporary, whatever you want to, whatever you want to do to live. And then after a few years, you can put something permanent there.
Yep.
Well, they didn't enforce it. They sold the lots and they basically walked away. Exactly.
Wipe their hands clean of it.
Exactly. And so what we were left with was a lot of shacks, tents. I mean, it wasn't a great situation to be living in. And the area really started to develop a reputation. It started going downhill. I mean, there were permanent homes there for sure that were nicer and had been there for years. But they were surrounded by homes that weren't quite as nice.
That's crazy.
So, imagine, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah, like tents, shacks, squalor. And that was what was happening during that era. And this is the 1920s. So, and again, it wasn't all like that, but a lot of it was.
Yeah. And that led to the nickname Hooligan Heights. Am I correct?
And
there's different theories on it.
That's correct.
Talk to us about some of the theories, how that might have started.
So the reputation, of course, with these, the way that the neighborhood was at the time, it was going downhill a little bit and or a lot.
Yeah.
And people in the other parts of the city, they kind of looked down at people who live in that neighborhood. They said, that's where people live that are not like the rest of us.
Yes.
And so that was going on. And at some point, people started calling them hooligans. And we're not really sure. We can't pinpoint an exact day, time when that happened. But newspaper accounts and older individuals that I've interviewed all seem to tie it to baseball.
Yeah.
The southwest side of Mishawaka had a baseball team. They were the southwest team. And they played other teams throughout the city. They played the Belgians a lot. So it could have been the Belgians, but it was quoted in the newspaper. They were a ragtag band of hooligans, and people started just calling them that. And you know what? Hooligans decided they were just going to own it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're hooligans. We live in Hooligan Heights.
Yes.
And they became the Hooligan Heights baseball team then, and that was their official name region-wide.
I love it.
By the 1930s.
Like a badge of honor.
Right.
Wearing
they
it.
took ownership of it.
That's one of the coolest names of a neighborhood, I'm telling you. Hooligan Heights.
It's the only one in the United States.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy, too. That's neat. And then when the Federal Housing Authority, the FHA, was created in the 1930s, it gave grades to neighborhoods and ranked them for, levels of risk of loans. I learned a lot about that when I interviewed Gabrielle Robinson, who wrote Better Homes of South Bend. And when I read the book, I didn't even know about this stuff, but neighborhoods were ranked and classified, and they gave them basically letter grades. A land is prime real estate, but then all the way down to hazardous, and it goes into the redlining and all that. You wrote that, you had wrote that Hooligan Heights would be embarking on a downward spiral and in the same path of decline for other redline neighborhoods throughout the United States. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay, so we're coming into the 1930s.
Yeah.
And this is the era of the Depression.
Yeah.
And so everyone was hurting. And with regard to homes, a lot of people were foreclosing on their homes. People had to leave. They couldn't afford to fix them up. It was really a scary time for a lot of Americans. And the federal government was well aware of this. And so what they had done is they established a new department. It was called the Homeowners Loan Corporation. It was an appendage of the New Deal. So it was a New Deal program.
Yeah.
And what it was meant to do is the federal government would purchase your mortgage. And then what they would do is they would reissue another mortgage at a lower interest rate. So you'd be able to pay it back.
Yes.
But they wanted to do this for everybody, but there was going to be a catch. And it's to your point. What they did is they sent out officials all over to the big cities all over the United States, and they ranked neighborhoods because they decided we're not going to rent to everyone. We are not going to give mortgages to anyone. We're not going to take over loans for just anyone. You have to be a good risk. And we are going to make those decisions about what is a good risk. And it was basically just walking through the neighborhood and making a visual appraisal of things. And you're right. A, B, C, or D is how you were ranked. A on the maps were colored in green. B, blue. C, yellow. And D was red. Hazardous. Was where we get the name today of redlining because government officials came in and said, basically, you guys don't look like the right kind of people. And so we are going to say that you are not allowed to have a federally backed loan for your home. And so what would happen then to these neighborhoods?
Right.
And by the way, and we talked about the Black population before, if you're in a minority neighborhood, you're automatically getting the D.
Right.
You get the D rating no matter where you are. Mm-hmm. So, but it was also happening in poor white neighborhoods, like Hooligan Heights. So they got the D rating. They got a hazardous rating, and the situation was already not good there in terms of what was happening financially,
the contemporary houses and all that stuff.
And so now this was going to drive the neighborhood even further down because now people, even if they wanted to, they couldn't get loans to finance any types of alterations or improvements. And you certainly wouldn't want to buy a home there. You couldn't buy a home there because there'd be no mortgage for you. So it was going to crush the neighborhood further. And this happened all over the United States.
Right. Just like a death spiral, and just it spiraled, snowballed for the most part.
Yeah. They didn't see that coming for whatever reason.
Right. It was an unintended consequence of them trying to, make sure what areas would be more not profitable, but more risk-free in investing in. But all of this, because the area's reputation and because residents felt they're being unfairly targeted and they were viewed differently than other parts, it led to the neighborhood opening up a civic club called the Southwest Civic Club.
Yeah, so
what was the main intent of it?
So the Southwest Civic Club was formed in 1949. It was basically an advocacy group. They felt like they were ignored by the city, and they wanted to have a unified voice. And they were not wrong. They were ignored by the city. The city very much didn't want to own up to anything that was going on over at Hooligan Heights. It was just they felt like it was a blighted kind of slum area, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So one of their biggest missions was to get a park. And so they did get a park. It was called Southwest Park. It was the predecessor for Mary Gibbard, who's in that space, but they were able to get a park for themselves, which is wonderful. They did this, but they weren't able to solve the bigger issues of poverty, dilapidated housing, and the group stayed active for several decades, but they were established to have a voice for that neighborhood.
Right. Now the building is still there? Am I correct or no? Was there a building?
There was no building. It was just It was just a club, or not a club. I don't want to say a club, a civic organization. For advocacy, and they would meet in different places.
Yeah, they probably met even in houses. Homes. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I see. And now a word from one of our sponsors. I want to talk a minute about the government of Portage Township right here in South Bend. Portage Township trustee Jason Critchlow and his team continue to fight for regular working families of South Bend every single day, and they are getting results. Their work continues to go beyond just providing temporary emergency assistance to families in crisis, which is important for the stability of our community. They have taken on major issues like renters' rights, fighting for the residents of Cedar Glen apartment complex. They created a new fire territory to increase public safety. And Portage Township's health and eating initiative, Nourish, is working to increase the health of low-income populations. Trustee Jason is even supporting local public education in a campaign to educate the community by bringing transparency to the local government processes. This year, in partnership with Real Services, Portage Township even opened the area's only permanent senior community center called the Portage Commons at Colfax and William Street in downtown South Bend. Learn more about these services and much, much more at portage-township.com. The link is in the show notes. A heartfelt thank you to Jason and your team for all that you do for our area. And this next part is so intriguing to me because I had no clue of I knew about urban renewal, but when I think of urban renewal, I always think of like downtown areas, like downtown South Bend being blocks wiped away for redevelopment. I think of Mishawaka near where the current government building is on Lincoln Way and Main Street. I know those blocks were tore out. Hooligan Heights was drastically affected, by urban renewal. And you even wrote, to the chagrin of despondent residents, much of Hooligan Heights was about to be obliterated. Now, you could probably do a whole episode just on this little era in Hooligan Heights, but let's talk about urban renewal in the neighborhood.
Yeah, so, and, this was a direct result of the fact that it had been redlined in the 1930s because the property went downhill. The only other sheerly residential area in Mishawaka that also went through urban renewal was near Dodge Manufacturing.
Okay.
That also was redlined. So and this is true in cities throughout the United States. You can draw a direct line between what you were classified as in the 1930s as to whether or not you went through urban renewal. But you are also right, Matt, that downtowns went through urban renewal too. Downtown Mishawaka, downtown South Bend. Interestingly, Mishawaka had the fourth largest urban renewal program in Indiana, which is crazy. And Hooligan Heights was the first area that would go through urban renewal. What they were trying to do was to take blighted neighborhoods, neighborhoods that had a slum appearance or what have you, and they were going to basically bulldoze them and have developers come in and just put new stuff there. Now, Hooligan Heights underwent was called a conservation project as far as urban renewal is concerned, meaning they weren't going to tear out everything.
Right.
But in some ways that made it even harder because they were going to leave some people there and they were going to remove some people.
Right.
So what they did is they established an office there in the neighborhood and every single house in Hooligan Heights had to be inspected.
That's by a rehabilitation director. Wow.
And so your house was classified in one of three ways. It was either one, you're fine. You don't have to do anything. You can stay here. Number two, you need to do some work if you want to stay here or you're going to get kicked out. Or number three, you're going to go. You're subpar. You can't, there is not, the money that you'd have to spend to fix this up is worth more than the house. You have to go.
Yes.
So that's what was happening. So there were people that were very indignant about having to have their homes inspected.
Of course.
And then, of course, when you get the news, you have to fix it up or go. People would try to fix it up. And in the worst case, of course, is them coming in and just saying, you have to leave and your home is going to be gone. I mean, they were being compensated, but it's this idea that the government is escorting you out of the home that where your memories are, where you grew up, where this idea was horrifying. And so a lot of people were watching their neighbors getting escorted out.
That's crazy.
Evidently, the people down on Panama Street were despondent. They were sobbing when they were leaving their houses because they were leaving their houses and their neighborhood and everything around it. And then, then to add insult to injury, Mishawaka says, okay, what we're going to do with these houses that are still standing, that we've evicted these people, we're going to have the fire department practice on them. So they set them on fire.
Oh, my God. That's just like salt in the wounds.
Exactly. So neighbors would look out of their door and they'd see the fire department, putting out a fire on a house that was burning down of their neighbors, somebody that they'd known for years, and we're now gone. And so while it wasn't as horrifying as a project where they would just tear down everything and tell everyone to go, people you were plucked.
Yes.
And so that made it tough.
Quite an emotional time. It just had to have been for sure. But as a whole, there were also positives to the urban renewal project.
That's correct.
Let's talk about some of those.
Okay, so, new homes.
Yes.
So people got nice new homes that were, some of which were subsidized with federal dollars. And they're still there today.
Yeah.
So, and they were new, modern amenities. Mary Gibbard Park came into play. And that, people today, the pool is gone now.
Right, it
that
is,
was there. But people today still wax nostalgic over that whole idea of we played in the pool at Mary Gibbard Park. But Mary Gibbard Park got all these new wonderful amenities, including that pool. And so it was a wonderful place in the neighborhood for kids to play. And also, too, and people don't realize this, the streets were not paved there.
That is what is wild.
It was dirt roads.
That's
and so
crazy.
Streets were paved. We got sidewalks.
Curbs.
We have curbs. We have gutters. And also, too, we had made sure they had running water everywhere, too, city water. A lot of people had outhouses before that. And this is not that long ago. I mean,
it's not.
So yeah, they had outhouses on their property.
That is crazy.
But anyway, so running water, city water everywhere. It's indoor. It lend itself to indoor plumbing and streets, sidewalks, all these things.
That's amazing.
You take for granted. There were people that I talked to that remembered before the roads were there, during the summertime, the oil trucks rumbling down the road and spreading the oil over the dirt roads because
to keep the dust down.
They said they can still smell it and hear it,
That's just wild, And you had mentioned in the article there's still like a part of the south side of the neighborhood that the streets still are not paved. It's more of an alleyway now, but that kind of, you have a picture in your article too. It kind of lends to what it used to look like, you know?
If you walk down Panama Street and you look south, a lot of the dirt roads or remnants of those dirt roads are still there. And there's a couple houses actually that face the dirt roads that are there extending south. But so when you look at it, you can kind of, if you can squint a little bit, you can take your mind back to the day when it was all like that, the entire neighborhood.
Yeah. But like I said earlier, one of my good buddies' moms had lived on Hubbard Street, and just in one of the 3-bedroom slab houses. And the whole time we'd hang out there in high school, it was just, I never thought of the history behind it, but that house built or either renovated or built in a part of urban renewal,
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And then I never realized that there are also much older homes, like we talked about earlier, that were a part of Floral Park when that was first being built.
That's correct. And there are homes there that are from the before 1910, so that were built between 1900 and 1910. And there's, if you look around, there's actually quite a few of them. The home I grew up in was built in the early 20s. So wow. So that home is over 100 years old. But that's crazy. Must have been one of the homes where they said either they fixed it up or they said it was okay.
Right.
So it stood.
But then after urban renewal, they were proud, and the Civic Club encouraged to keep their houses.
Yes, the Civic Club went around and they worked with people. They made sure that they kept their houses up. They wanted to make sure that the neighborhood didn't decline again. They were very, very concerned about that. They said, we have this wonderful new neighborhood now that it's here. So let's work to make sure we can keep it that way.
Yep.
And ironically about this whole thing, the mayor, Mayor Canfield, was so excited about the magnificent changes to Hooligan Heights. He announced in a report to the federal government, we're getting rid of the name Hooligan Heights. We're never talking about that again. And from now on, it's going to be the LaSalle School Neighborhood or something of that nature. But of course, within a generation, the name was back, and
that's awesome.
It was, it was wishful thinking on his part that the name was just going to go away.
Right. That's neat though. The name stuck. I love it. You wrote that the Hooligan Heights area or Floral Park, today wouldn't be recognizable to anyone who resided here 100 years ago. Talk to us about that.
Well, of course, there's new homes that are there, very new homes from the urban renewal area. There's no more of those vacant lots. Everything's filled in now. Of course, the beautiful park, Mary Gibbard, which has undergone
another yet again,
like in the late teens. It's absolutely beautiful over there. The kids from LaSalle School actually had a hand in designing some of that.
Good.
So, of course, streets are paved. We have the infrastructure, gutters and sidewalks. And no more outhouses.
Yes.
No more shacks or tents or squalor. And, of course, we have mail carriers now. We didn't have mail carriers back in the day. There's businesses on main thoroughfares, not sprinkled throughout. And, that glorious twin bulb lighting that goes down Melbourne Boulevard. It makes it a landmark. I mean, that wasn't there, obviously, in the 1920s. But
and the island in between there.
Yes. It's iconic.
Yeah.
It's iconic.
Yeah.
But most importantly, now we can go into the neighborhood and now we see people of every background and every color.
Absolutely.
It wasn't true at one time. And now everyone can live there. It's a neighborhood for all.
Yep. Absolutely. Lastly, why do you, because I've learned a lot about Mishawaka's history over the course of my interest in local history. Why do you think it's often overlooked?
Well, in this particular neighborhood, it's located outside the downtown area. And people get more excited about those things.
Of course.
And there's not really anything in the neighborhood that's architecturally significant outside of LaSalle School.
That's
people
true.
don't... don't look to it to go to look at different buildings or what have you. But also, too, there's an element of the people that live there. It's a strong working class neighborhood. And anecdotally, in Chicago in 1915, there was a pleasure boat that tipped over in the Chicago River. It was called the Eastland. It tipped over in 1915, just a couple years after the Titanic. More passengers died on that boat than on the Titanic.
And you never hear about it hardly.
Right, because it was a working class pleasure boat.
I gotcha.
So in some ways, I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but we think about people like the drama and the class warfare. We've got just a solid neighborhood that's there. And so there's not all the drama and excitement that happens sometimes when you think about that class warfare. But also, too, and this is something, and this is why I'm glad I'm here today, I think a lot of it is because the social history there wasn't known. And I appreciate you bringing attention to it today. That neighborhood was a microcosm of anything and everything that was going wrong and right in housing in America over the course of like 60 years. And it happened right there.
Right.
People lived through it. Mishawaka lived through it. And it had almost been forgotten. Most people don't know that it happened. And really, we've only uncovered it recently, everything that happened there. So now that people know about it, I hope that, like you, they go and stroll the streets and maybe think about what happened.
Yeah, it's a story. It is an absolute social story. It's not just about bricks and mortar and wood and cement. I mean, people lived through that, and it was a microcosm of bigger things going on in our country, too. So I appreciate you coming on and talking about Hooligan Heights. I guarantee you that folks who listen to us will love the story.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Round the Bend Now and Then. An extra special thanks to Susanna Ernst for all of your passion and sharing your knowledge about our local history. Again, check out her article about Hooligan Heights at the website in our show notes. Once again, I want to thank the sponsors of this episode, the Mishawaka Historical Museum, MT Box Computers, and the Portage Township Trustee Office. Join us again next time as we learn more about South Bend and Mishawaka's Now and Then.